If we could find the right piece of land and build them some really nice places.
Where would those pieces of land be?
Well, they could be in Jordan and they could be in Egypt.
Settlers have been trying to erase the indigenous for a very long time, and they've developed lots of tools for the toolbox: war, disease, famine, settlements, re-education camps. But there's one in particular that's been on my mind: forcible transfer.
And you'd have people living in a place that could be very beautiful.
It's interesting because if you survive the move, you're still alive. You carry with you your memories and you fight to pass them down to your children and them to theirs.
This is Kabri Forest.
But there's something else that dies. Something bigger and older than any individual life or home left behind. The essence of a people. So what exactly gets lost when you uproot a people? If you like our work and want to help us continue telling stories like this, you can become a paid member of our Patreon. Now back to the video. From the moment I saw this painting, I was mesmerized. Mostly by her hands. They're big and strong, and she carries all those oranges effortlessly, like her hands were made for it. She feels really familiar and looks so out of place. It's called The Immigrant by Palestinian artist Sulaiman Mansour. I first saw it in Bethlehem in 2018 on my trip to Palestine. I was there alone, going through the grief and honor of being back on our land, not just for myself, but for the whole family. Because I was the first person able to actually go back. So I logged everything. Looking through all the pictures now, it's mostly of the land. Especially when I got to what used to be our village, Al-Kabri. It's on the outskirts of Akka, in the north of occupied Palestine. Our village is one of over 500 Palestinian towns and villages that were destroyed when Zionist militias ethnically cleansed Palestine. I took lots of pictures for my family to see, and for myself.
It's like we never existed.
To try to hold on to it. To this plot of earth that, to Israelis, is now a highway, a national forest, and a kibbutz. But to me, to us, this was home for, as far as we can trace it, a very long time.
We were driving through the kibbutz that they built, and you should see the trees that they have. I swear to God, a pomegranate tree with the biggest, fattest, ripest, most red pomegranate. The color is so vibrant, so healthy.
I asked my family what we used to grow on our land besides tobacco, which I knew. Vegetables, fruits, oranges, lemons, and grapes. It wasn't easy to get the information.
You don't understand how gorgeous it is here.
My dad reached out to his cousin, who asked his uncle, who also lived in the village. I wonder how much else we lost that I don't even know to ask about. See, when a people are uprooted, they may have survived, they may be alive, but there's something invaluable that can die. Something immaterial and bigger than any individual life. And it's this thing that explains what it means to be indigenous. I realized this when I was learning about another indigenous people halfway across the world. They called it Turtle Island, and for thousands of years it was home to millions of Native Americans. In the Pacific Northwest, abundant forests and waterways created cultures centered on fishing and forestry, like the Tlingit. Tlingit speakers don't say left or right, they say toward the water or toward the mountains. One ancient narrative they tell is of Salmon Boy, a story that speaks to how salmon, a central part of their sustenance and culture, feel, make choices, and respond to human actions. In the Great Plains, bison herding was the main way of life for tribes like the Lakota. So life followed the herds and was nomadic. Buffalo were central to survival, culture, and spirituality.
They clothed us, they fed us, they gave us inner strength to carry on.
The buffalo adopted the Indian, the Lakota, as his younger brother.
And in the southeast, fertile lands allowed for large-scale agriculture. This area was home to the Cherokee, who, along with others, used complex irrigation systems to grow the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, grown together in a sustainable system where each plant supported the other. They also, along with many other tribes across North America, practiced controlled burning, which would clear undergrowth and make space for edible plants and medicinal herbs. This maintained healthy forests and reduced wildfires.
Work with nature, expand habitat, decenter humans, and design for perpetuity.
And there's way more. Before the first arrival of settlers, around 250 distinct languages were spoken. And each of these languages is inseparable from the land it comes from. The mountains, rivers, forests, and creatures of every region are woven into the language, stories, ceremonies, and way of life of the people who live there, and are considered animate beings. Losing access to this land would mean losing access to this language, which is losing an entire system of knowledge and spiritual connection. Unfortunately, that would come to happen for many Native American tribes, when settlers arrived with a very different philosophy towards the land.
They often mislabeled them as virgin land or wilderness instead of what they really were, living heirlooms, thousands of years in the making.
Settlers to the New World saw this land not as a living, breathing being, but as a blank canvas, a 2D backdrop to carve out a new civilizational fantasy. They did a lot to clear the natives: massacres, disease, broken treaties, but we're looking at forcible transfer. The most famous example comes from the Southeast. It's known as the Trail of Tears. It's when the US government forcibly removed thousands of indigenous people from their ancestral lands in the 1830s. People were marched at gunpoint with little food and poor shelter for hundreds of miles in extreme weather.
Sick and feeble, many near death. One woman was carrying her youngest child who was dying in her arms.
Those that survived the journey made it to a radically different terrain: Oklahoma. Thousands of years of self-sufficiency, language, science, medicine, diet, spirituality, all tethered to the land, suddenly suspended from the reality they're based on. In this new reality, resources weren't as abundant, and communities were split up. Previously self-sufficient and environmentally sustainable tribes became dependent on US government rations. Cut off from their sacred sites, ceremonies and spiritual practices began fading away. And they cut them off from one another. Children were sent to boarding schools where, separated from their families, they were forcibly assimilated into white Euro-American culture. Yes, they were alive, but something else was being killed. Inherited knowledge, science refined over generations, a responsibility to tend to the plants and animals of a region, a sense of collective self, totally uprooted. Things that define a culture and a people are learned organically, from just existing in your community on your land. Removing the land removes the space for that exchange, and splitting up communities makes trying to collect that knowledge to save it so much harder. I wonder what words we had in our dialect that we lost to the Nakba, what rituals around land we would perform, what creatures we tended to. I'm sure it's out there somewhere or in someone. Thankfully, they didn't manage to expel us all.
ذكر هذا الشارع اللي أكل من جريرات وأنا رايح على المدرسة في المدرسة الكابرة أنا تعلمت كنا عايشين مش بيقولوا مهد عيسى يا أخي إحنا كنا عايشين في الجنة في مهد عيسى صدقني إن اكتفاء ذاتي جماعة فلاحين على قدنا عايشين بأرضنا مبسوطين.
But they expelled plenty. Just like Turtle Island, with tribes changing as the land does, Palestine's diverse terrain is home to diverse, old relationships to the land. That's why so many of our symbols are from the land. The sabr, the date, the figs, the grapes, the watermelon, the orange, za'atar, and of course, the olive tree. Every year after the first rainfall of October, it's harvesting season. Families gather to pick trees that are hundreds of years old, on groves passed down from generation to generation.
When you ask them, for example, how do you think your olive yield is going to be this year? Their answer is always about, depends on my service. They believe they are serving the tree. And I know this all sounds so romantic in some way, but actually it's still in the language. They call it service. It is a relationship based on reciprocity rather than one person using the soil and abusing the soil to get the crop they want.
The land finds its way into Palestinian clothing too. The embroidery, or tatriz, on women's clothing would reflect the area, town, or village of the person wearing it, and the natural landscape of every region. And the land is central in our music and our dance. And despite the differences from place to place, Palestinians have always been in communication with one another, trading and exchanging, traveling, gathering for ceremonies and festivals. Until they came.
The colonists' aggressive attitude towards the native peasants stemmed from their anger towards those who reminded them that there is still another people in the land of Israel that have been living there and does not intend to leave.
They say it was a land without a people for a people without a land, and that they made the desert bloom. In 1948, Zionist militias methodically ethnically cleansed Palestine for Zionist settlement, leading to the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. We call this the Nakba. The new reality was a fragmented Palestine carved into 4 new colonial geographies: the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 territories, what they call Israel. That's where our village was. Some Palestinians were able to remain, but many were effectively transferred to refugee camps both in these new territories and in neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. My maternal grandmother was in the womb when her father was killed, the first martyr from our village, and her mother left on foot, alone, pregnant, and with 4 other children, to Lebanon. She made it to a camp called Burj al-Barajne, where my grandmother would be born and raised, and would eventually meet my grandfather. My paternal grandparents were from the same village. They left to Burj al-Barajne too. It's one of 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon that are still around today.
The camera is not even doing it justice, I swear to God.
I think it's hard to gather information about what we lost in Palestine because the trauma didn't end with leaving El Kabri. It continued in Lebanon.
Their right to work and own property are limited by Lebanese law.
Life in Lebanon for Palestinian refugees was not easy. They left behind their property and their wealth and their lives to start from scratch in a new place, where they were and still are barred from working in 39 different fields, including law, engineering, and medicine.
اللي بعتذر منك ما مشغل فلسطينية. قلت له بس بدي أسألك سؤال إنه أنت مراءك خلقت لبناني يعني مراءك أنت خلقت لبناني وأنا خلقت فلسطيني؟ قال لي مش من عنا الوزارة ما بتقبل تشغل فلسطيني.
And then in 1975, there was the Lebanese Civil War.
The toll of human life is horrifying,
which started when Lebanese Falangist militias ambushed a bus carrying Palestinian civilians, killing 27 people.
When Jordan expelled the Palestinian guerrillas in 1970, many of them moved into Lebanon, from whose southern border they could stage raids against Israel.
We are against the Palestinian because we think that the whole problem is the Palestinian. We have 450,000 Palestinians in Lebanon. This is our problem.
The war lasted 15 years and saw thousands of Palestinians massacred.
The ruins of a Palestinian refugee camp on the outskirts of Beirut. The immensity of the crime shocked the world. The killers, members of a Lebanese rightist militia, got away as easily as they had arrived. To do so, they had to pass through Israeli lines.
During the war, Israel invaded Lebanon, overseeing massacres and bombing campaigns. My aunt Buran was killed when Israel bombed the bus she was on in 1982.
I guess that's it.
What's been passed down to me about El Kabri is factual. What we grew, who our neighbors were, how we lived. But there's information I crave that I'm not sure survived in our family. How did we tend to these plants? When did we harvest? What did we call a specific bud? What plants did we use medicinally? Like most Palestinian refugees, they left in a hurry with their keys in their pockets, expecting to come back. I don't think they had the time or luxury to pause and collect these tidbits in the middle of more unfolding trauma. Thankfully, not all of us were transferred. Many remained and continue to keep these traditions alive and are working on preserving and reviving them for future generations. But Israel continues to try to forcibly remove Palestinians from their land, either explicitly
to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level.
or by making life so unlivable that Palestinians might voluntarily leave.
Families on the move, just some of the tens of thousands of Palestinians whom Israeli soldiers have forced from their homes in the occupied West Bank.
What they did to Gaza, they're now doing to us.
In the West Bank, it looks like home demolitions, land seizures, tearing up roads, denying electricity, denying water. And there's a particular terror reserved for Palestinian shepherds and farmers, still deeply rooted in the land. And in Gaza, getting people to voluntarily leave looks like maintaining a suffocating, oppressive siege, where at one point, Israel even controlled how many calories made it in. And of course, indiscriminately decimating the strip, its people, its infrastructure, and its land. The orchards, farms, trees, soil, groundwater, sea, and air were all directly targeted to make Gaza unlivable, to break the connection to the land by breaking the land.
شجر الزيتون هذا كله هان مات تعرض لضربة قوية.
It wasn't just a genocide, it was also ecocide.
How many olive trees did you have?
4,500.
And how many of them did Israel destroy during this genocide?
All.
Is this the first time that Israel has destroyed your olive groves?
No, the fourth time.
But in the face of all this violence and terror, Palestinians remain. And not only do they remain, they return.
Started to smell like Gaza.
الله يرحم حامد يا أمه، الله يرحمه، كان هو بيستقبلنا أول واحد يا أمه. بسيبها وبطلع، لا بموت في غزة وأنا بسيبها. بوس ترابها قبل ما تروح، بوس ترابها.
It's in these situations that the meaning of indigeneity is on full display. Despite having protections not afforded to Palestinians, in the face of danger, the settler flees because there's no tether to the land. That's why they say things like this.
Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative.
Because to the settler, a good life is possible on any land. Land is just a place to live, a backdrop. It might have some excavated ideological story, but there's no relationship, no roots to keep them settled. That's why when they came to Palestine, they planted thousands of pine trees over the remnants of Palestinian villages. Trees for cover, trees for decoration, a prop. And why from when they arrived to this day, they don't seem to have difficulty burning and uprooting olive trees that are hundreds of years old. According to an Iroquois story of creation, the world was made when Sky Woman fell from above and was saved by the animals below. The geese caught her, the turtle carried her, and the muskrat dove to the bottom of the sea to bring her mud that she would use to make land. She spread the mud across the turtle's back and began to sing and dance in appreciation. And as she did, the land grew and grew from a smear of mud to what we know as the earth. It's why they call North America Turtle Island. The story speaks to a central philosophy in their culture, that the land is not our property, isn't ours to own. It welcomed us, saved us, and we feed it in return. It reminds me of how in Arabic we say أصحاب الأرض, which literally translates to friends of the land.
سامحنا لأن إحنا ما إحناش قادرين نحافظ عليك
Indigeneity doesn't just mean to live on a land for ages. If that were the case, settlers would eventually become indigenous too, and those forcibly transferred would stop being indigenous. To be indigenous means to be part of the land, part of its ecosystem, its tending, its caretaking. It's a responsibility and connection and inherited knowledge that you can't know in a lifetime. So when you remove people from their land and drop them somewhere foreign to them, you have severed the continuity of this ancient knowledge.
And our elders have told us that our job is to remember, to remember.
Unfortunately, some of it gets lost forever. But the wound this removal leaves, and the need to keep the connection alive, will always remain.
Shinasha means I am still here.
هاي رسالة من ستي اللي مواليد 1922 لترامب اللي بده يهجرنا. ما غصب عنك يا ستي بدهم يطلعونا.
ريت روحها تطلع. احنا ثابتين في الأرض زي الزيتون.